This is basically a window light skimming across, and she's standing in her doorway between her bathroom and her bedroom. And you know, this is one of those pictures where it's like, oh, this is a fun picture. Well, let me tell you the reality of it. And once I tell you what you're about to see, then you're going to go, oh, now I see it. What's in the background is a clear glass shower door. You see the handle on the left that I didn't crop out? The little metal handle? And look in the background through the glass, you'll see there's a blue shampoo bottle in the shower. So we shoot where we can, and that was the best place in the house for me to get this great light quality on her. And I knew it, she knew it, and said, let's shoot right here. So we shot in a doorway in the bathroom. And that's what we do sometimes. We have to do what we do. Here's Jamie Little from ESPN Sports, and this is at the beach in San Diego. This is about 30 or 45 minutes after sunset. It was after sunset. You know? John Sexton calls it quiet light. When everything's quiet. When that sun is dropped, you've got, depending on your ISO and depending on what you're trying to get, you've still got light in the sky that you can still work. And sometimes that's where some of the greatest pictures come from. And most people think, oh, sun's down, we got to stop and head back to the car. Wait a couple of minutes before you do that and look around. And think about longer exposures. And especially today, we can get away with it because of the great ISOs that we're working with. For years, how many of us were scared to go up to 400 ISO? Grain, noise, can't do that, you know. I regularly shoot at 3200 now. I regularly shoot sometimes at 6400. It's amazing what we can do. I'm sure in the world of forensics, you guys are capturing things that you've never been able to do before at ISO 12,000 and even more.
That's true. We can get a lot of detail out, and we can even do long exposures. We do a lot of fluorescent photography, 10, 15 seconds.
Right.
And just the detail is phenomenal.
And you're seeing things you've never been able to see before. So this is at an elevator. This is in a hotel where the elevator opened on her floor, and I grabbed her and pulled her off the elevator and took a portrait of her with just a window light. Funny old gal. She was great. I'll never forget her. It's a great story there. Our job, and one of the things that I talk about a lot, is that I'm not so much, on some days, not so much a photographer as I'm a contrast controller. And I know that if I photograph something dark, in order to produce contrast, I have to have something light. And if I'm photographing something light, I have to have something dark. You guys are making notes on light white paper with dark ink because you need the information. I need the information on this 8-ball. That highlight, that softbox reflected in that black highlight tells me everything about the ball. It tells me what? It tells me it's round. It's not flat. It tells me it's got depth because I've got a keystone-looking highlight. It's sharp edge, so it tells me that it's highly reflective. It's highly polished. It tells me everything I need to know about that 8-ball. That's what highlights do. On the other hand, if I'm going to photograph something white, I've got to deal on the other side of the scale. I've got to deal with the shadows. And the shadows tell me everything about something that is white. Make sense? Think about the tool that you're about to use when you're about to photograph something that's very, very light or something that's very, very dark. Or someone that's very, very light or someone that's very, very dark. Okay? You might choose a different tool. If you're photographing someone with, you know, an African American with really dark, dark skin, I might choose to use more specular light, smaller light sources, create more highlights to create that shape and form and texture, as opposed to someone with really, 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 really light skin, you know, Kelly O'Donnell from Ireland or Scotland, with really, really white skin, where all I need to work on is the lower side of the scale, the shadow side. Make sense? There's Miss Mandy. One light portraiture. This is a one light shot where I've got the light away from camera, beyond 90 degrees to my subject, coming back across the face to give me that light quality. And I've got it turned just a little bit to where I'm letting a little bit of light spill onto that background so I can pull this off with one light. And I think that's one of the things, in the studio, this is the way my brain works. Outdoors, I think exactly the same way. Same thing here on this portrait of Aaron. This is one light, and we'll be able to reproduce this exact same picture outside today with sun, with ambient light, and with flash. And we'll do the same picture outside. It doesn't matter to me as long as it's a light source. I don't think, the sun I think of as a main light outside, just like a main light in the studio I use. In the studio, what's really interesting is that we place our subject where we want them, and then we move the light around till we get the shot that we want. When we go outside, the sun is already placed for us. We set our subject there, and we move our subject until we get the light we want. Totally different deal. One is always stationary, though. Well, the sun moves, but not very fast. We can catch it. Yeah. And the good thing, there's a really good thing about working with the sun. Recycle time. It's rather quick. This shot just got picked up by the Santa Fe Photographic Workshop. They're using this in a national ad series, so you'll see it in all the photo magazines this year coming up. I'm real excited about that. So size of the light source is always relative to its distance to the subject. Size is relative to distance. And that's going to be a big key to what we're talking about today. And creating depth and shape and form and all of that. It's all about size, changing everything about a photograph. So for example, let me draw something out here. If you think about creating depth, think about handing a marker to a kid and say, draw a balloon. That's what they'll do. There's your balloon. Well, we know better. We know that if it's going to be a balloon, it's missing some things. I don't know that it's a balloon because it doesn't have this. It's missing some element. It's missing something that shows me the dimension of it. And it's missing maybe this, right? In a world of representing something two-dimensionally that's of an object that's three-dimension, our goal is to produce depth. We have to produce depth. I can't produce depth unless I can do this. And I have to do this all day long, and I've got to do it under control, and I can't miss. So I know that if I use a bigger source and my highlight gets bigger, it becomes softer, the shadow becomes softer, everything changes. Or if I back that up and that highlight becomes smaller, my shadow becomes sharper, everything changes. So we have to understand our tools really well, and that's part of what this discussion's about. Size relative to distance. As I move a light source, any source, and this means the sun with a diffuser on it or a softbox outside or whatever it is that we use, as we change that light source, the size of that light source, either its physical size or its distance to my subject, if I increase the size of the source, it diminishes the actual brightness of the highlight, and it softens the edge of the shadow. So I've got three controls there: the sharpness of the highlight, the sharpness of the edge of the shadow, and the brightness level of the highlight. So if I increase the size of the highlight, I can soften the highlight and soften my shadow, depending on what I use. In fact, let me just move over and let me see if I've got one more slide right there. Yesterday, Roberto talked about the law of the inverse square. Here's the way this works, and he explained it really well, but let me just recap this for those that weren't here yesterday. Light falls off by the square of the distance. I promise we're going to get into great pictures. I promise we're going to take pictures today. I promise it's not all going to be science and boring stuff. Stay with me, you guys. All right, so here we go. So on the left, my softbox is 3x4 softbox that's 5 feet away from the vase. Okay, 5 feet away. On the right, it's moved from 5 feet to 10 feet. Bam, I doubled the distance. And it became 1/4 the size. And the highlight became 4 times as bright. Get it? It's physics. That's what happened. Now, don't even talk about exposure yet. That's different. That's quantity of light. We're talking quality of light. So anytime I increase a light source, I will always soften the edge of the shadow. And I will also diminish the actual brightness of a highlight. That's why these soft boxes in this studio here are big and soft, to create soft shadows. If it was small, mini spots, you guys know what that would look like. You've seen that. We've been through that. But it's all about size relative to distance. That's what we do in our world. And it doesn't matter to me if it's in the studio or out in the alley or up on the roof, which we're going to take you guys up on the roof today too, by the way. we're gonna do roof pics. You know, everybody's like, you want to shoot on the roof? Oh, sure, let's shoot on the roof. Everybody's like, you want to shoot on the roof? It's like, absolutely. Does this make sense? It has to make a little bit of sense. And if you're getting a reflection on somebody's face, I've heard people say, oh, her skin's really oily. Really? Is her skin really oily, or are you just using really small light sources? Increase the size of the highlight, and you can smooth out those shiny little hot spots on someone's face to be a little bit more pleasing, like on the left. Make sense? Think about photographing a couple. If indeed the size of the source also has to do with the sharpness of an edge of a shadow, think about you get a phone call tomorrow in your little studio where a couple wants you to photograph their 50th wedding anniversary. What's your first clue? Age. How old are they? They're not young if they're celebrating 50 years together, right? So they're at least 70 and more. Right, so they all share one thing at that age. Wrinkles. And what do wrinkles appear as? Ugly. Shadows. They appear as shadows. However, I have to correct you on one thing. They appear as shadows on light skin. On dark skin, they appear as highlights. What? Think about it. Yeah. Same with a blemish. A blemish on someone's face, on a high school senior. A blemish doesn't appear as a blemish. It appears as a shadow of a blemish. But on the African American kids, it appears as a highlight. I've got to know this junk, you guys. I got to know all of it because I'm in control of it. I'm in charge of how this stuff appears, right? So I know that if they're coming in for this portrait and they're celebrating 50 years, I know I want to make them look great. I want a complimentary likeness. I want to enhance their face, not make them go, oh, I'm old. Great. So if I can soften the edge of those shadows or the wrinkles by increasing the size of my source, I win. They look great and I get a good picture. So point there, don't use a small source if you know someone's going to have wrinkled skin. Use a bigger source. Give them a little break. Help them. You can do that. Not just that you can do that, but you should do it. It's your job. Complimentary likeness. Unless you don't like them very much and you don't want them to buy anything. Then you can do whatever you want. Okay, so this is a case. Again, I'm letting light skim past my subject and lighting my background. I've got a 3x4 softbox here. And again, we're going to do the same shot outside. So I've got my 3x4 softbox, and here's my subject. Let's say I'm photographing Brett. So here's Brett, here's my subject right here, and I've got my softbox there, my camera's there, and just before I shoot, I'm just going to go eek, and I'm just going to tweak that box over a little bit rotationally, so some of it's headed to the background. Great, I don't have to have a second light back there. Not everybody has 2 lights, not everybody has 3 or 4. Some people start out with 1. Make sense? Here's a combination of ambient light and flash, and we're going to do a lot of that today. This is old Donald out on a movie set. And in this case, it's, again, my 3x4 softbox, which I brought and will use. It's my favorite tool. I use it all the time. It's a Profoto RFI box, and it's just a great size. It's a perfect all-around size. And it works great in the studio. It works great on location. It's just a real nice size for me to do. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, a little bit more in depth. Before I get too involved in that, I want to go over one more thing here. When I talk about the things that Da Vinci said about creating depth and shape and form and texture and dimension, think about this. I've got this lovely portrait with main light on my right of camera, and then I've got these 2 accent lights coming from behind. Here's what happens if I turn them off. Now, you can't see the information if you're using white ink taking your notes. I need to separate her hips and her waist from that dark background. I can't see what her shape is. I'm not getting information. So I'm taking a 6-inch by 36-inch strip light, and I'm placing it back there, and I'm just winking it on, bink, right there. Now I can see the information. Now I can see her shape. Make sense? If there's any signature thing that I have in my work, I almost always work with an accent light or 2, because I really want to be able to get true shape and form of my subjects. Okay? And then on the other side, I just felt that it was needed there as well, so bink. There we go. In the file, I retouched out the highlight on the piano hinge that she's leaning on. But it gave me, again, the whole idea here, and what I mostly want you guys to get with this segment is the information about depth. It's all about creating depth. Okay? Wedding photographers for so long have just shot with a flash on camera for so many years, and it's just record-keeping pictures, and that's fine. But we could do better, and we could do more, and now that we have higher ISOs, we are seeing people doing better and doing more things. And I know photographers that are shooting weddings now at ISO 6400 with 2.8 prime lenses that they never turn on a flash. You know, they're shooting at 1/25 at 2.8 in a dark country club now, and they're able to get great pictures, well lit, good shape, light quality, without that on-camera flash look. So we've never had that before. Technology is our friend. Da Vinci said, "You must not mark any muscles with hardness of line, but let the soft light glide upon them and terminate imperceptibly in delightful shadow. From this will arise grace and beauty to the face." Yeah, we just thought he was an artist. The guy's a poet. What a talent. Where did this guy come from? I mean, good grief. Here's what's interesting. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Raphael, all these guys lived in the same time frame, and they were on the same town going after the same dollar from the same client. How would you like to go into competition with that? You're worried about the part-time photographer down the street taking your wedding work away from you. You know, it's like, how would you like to go in against those guys? Any questions about that? Can you think about this, and can you start to see maybe a little, I'm not too much altruistic, but I do know that we have a responsibility when we take on the mantle of being a professional photographer to try to do the best we can, And we also can get away with things most people can't get away with. People allow us a little bit of a wider berth. We get a little bit more. You can stand in front of a U.S. president and tell him what to do, and it's a great feeling. There's nothing like saying, "Lord, can you just quit smiling for a second?" Posing. I'm not a good poser, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I found this cartoon. I thought it was great. Based on all the head tilts, maybe I better explain this again. Look at those head tilts right there. As photographers that have to pose people for a living, my rule is very simply this: if it'll bend, bend it. I don't care if it's a neck or a head or a shoulder or a wrist or a finger or a toe or a wrist or an ankle or a knee. If it'll bend, bend it. If it's a man, bend it hard. If it's a woman, bend it soft. Make sense? So for example, if a man, you might pose a man standing like this. This is a pretty natural pose for a guy standing around a cocktail party. But if I'm going to photograph his wife, her hand might best be suited if it was bent a little softer. But I am saying if it'll bend, bend it. Okay, that's all my posing lighting. That's my posing lesson right there. Let's go study posing with Tony. That won't take long. But I've got a photograph. I'm photographing a bride, and she's standing with all of her weight on one foot here. And most people just, have their knee pushed in a little bit like this. Well, fine. Let's have her push her foot away a little bit further, and then just have her drag her foot in, like bam, freeze right there. Now I've got all the S's involved. Everything's bent, and everything looks more elegant. Make sense? So that's the tip of the day. Bend it. Okay. Again, let's go back to light quality and light quantity. And as we dig into this a little bit more in depth throughout the day, you're going to hear me use terms and say things that most people haven't really thought about. But I'm kind of a simpleton. I didn't go to college. And so for me, I try to break everything down into the simplest, I just want to try to make everything as simple as I can. The lowest common denominator. So I found that if I think about this, I came up with, on the left side of this page, I came up with 4 things that are what I call the applications of light. Okay? Additive, subtractive, transmission, reflective. Additive, subtractive, transmission, reflective. That's it. That's what I get. Every picture that I've ever taken, every picture that you've ever taken, have employed one of those on the left. You've either added light to existing light that was already there, which we're going to do in just a minute when we go outside. We'll add flash to an ambient situation. That's additive. Subtractive, where you're trying to take light away from where you don't need it, right? Transmission, where you have light that transmits through some type of an interruption, often a pop-up diffuser. Those guys? I never know what to call them. So I always just tell, the assistants, grab that, they know what it is. Those are disposable, by the way. you can't ever fold them back down, so you have to throw them away and go buy another one. Or reflective, where light is bouncing off of something, off of a building, off of a white shirt. Often, when I used to shoot weddings years ago, my assistants would always wear white shirts, and I would often have them, if I'm photographing the cake, so Julie's my cake and I'm shooting here, I would have an assistant right there, and I would make him take off his dark jacket and turn his back to me, and I would take my flash and spin it and aim it at his shirt. So I would bounce off of his shirt, and I would get beautiful light softly coming across my cake instead of flat lighting into my cake. Everybody's like, how do you lighten these cakes? With Bob. I use Bob lighting. But often then, I'm pairing one of those applications of light on the left with one of the tools on the right. Okay, so sunlight, portable flash, studio light, or ambience. And that can be a continuous source. It can be one of these Kino flows. It can be a fluorescent tube. It can be an ice light. It can be whatever you choose. But one of those, one from column A always goes with one from column B. And today is exploring all those 4 applications, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to beat up all 4 of those things. Okay, you game? Okay. Here's an additive situation where basically I've got a given amount of light, and I'm adding light to it. So this is outdoors, and I want that. This is the background that the client wanted, but we needed to make it darker, and they wanted this vintage look. So we brought in a flash up high, strobe up high, coming down, and basically we took the shot without the flash firing until we got the background density what we wanted, and that became the shot. And in fact, it was 250 at 16. Great, that's my exposure. Then I just powered up my strobe until I got to 16 and pulled the trigger, and that's what happens. Make sense? Interesting thing about additive light. Often what happens is I see photographers everywhere that flash outdoors gets so confusing. And it really doesn't need to be so confusing. Let me explain to you that we live in a world of reciprocal exposures. Within photography, we have reciprocating exposures. I always think of it as gears that just kind of lock together. 500 at 5.6 is the same exposure as a 60th at f/16, right? Those are locked together. Those exposures work great together in an ambient light situation. As soon as you turn on a flash, all bets are off. They no longer touch. Now the aperture is controlled entirely by the flash is controlled entirely by your aperture. And your background and all ambience is controlled entirely by your shutter. Right. So the two aren't together any longer as soon as you bring out flash in an ambient world. Which explains why you can't put your camera on AV or program, put your flash on TTL and go outside and get all the pictures that you want exactly to look the way you want them. The camera doesn't know what you want. It doesn't know what to give you because it doesn't know what you want. We're going to talk about some ETTL outside in a second, but I'm going to choose the shutter speed and the exposure. I'm not going to let the camera do that. I'm going to let the camera figure out how much flash I've got. I mean the flash itself for the ETTL. But the rest of it I've got to be in charge of, and that's the thing that some photographers seem to miss with the additive technique. Think about this. This is late in the day, shooting against the sky. If the exposure was opened up for her face without flash, what do you think the sky would look like? White. Totally washed out. But detail was needed to be in the sky, so you had to bring up the flash to be able to pull it off. Cowboy Bob again. Here, this is on a movie set, and in the background, there's a bunch of stuff that cannot be moved. And it's like, well, we can't move that. How are we going to get rid of it? Well, we can't get rid of it. Well, can we move somewhere else? No, you got to shoot right here. Well, what are we going to do? Easy. You take the flash outside. It looks like a window light shot. It's not. It's flash outside the window, firing through the window. Because as soon as I turn on the flash, then I can separate those two, bump my exposure up, bump my shutter speed higher, and make my background go darker. And that's what we did. It's the only way I could get rid of the junk in the background. Make sense? I have to have all these little tools in my toolbox, you guys, because I don't know what's going to happen when I go out on this next job. I don't know and I don't know what kind of equipment failure is going to happen. We have failures from time to time. Does that ever happen to anybody? Yeah. Yeah. No, everything always works perfect for me. This was a picture that I did for, I was interviewed on Fox News in San Diego, and what was the challenge with this was as I pulled up to the studio, I knew they were going to interview me, and I knew I was going to do a shoot with Miss San Diego. And I expected it to be in the studio. What I didn't expect, it was going to be in the parking lot. And so, here's your challenge. You've got to shoot Miss San Diego. You got to nail it. They're going to interview you live. They're going to bump to a 60-second commercial and come back, and all your pictures are going to be on TV. Feeling a little pressure? Right? And then couple that with pulling into the parking lot to have the producer say, oh yeah, you're going to shoot right back there in the back in the parking lot. And as I pulled around the corner, here's what's going on in the parking lot. Let me hit this next button. There's a little doggy fashion show. There are 3 DJs on a live radio channel on the Magic 92.5, all broadcasting live, broadcasting from the parking lot at Fox News. There's all this stuff going on, and you can see where my background's hanging. I got to get right in the middle of that and pull this off. And it kind of throws you for a minute. And then it's like, okay, wait a second, take a deep breath. What are we dealing with? Oh, that's additive technique. So we're just going to use shutter speed to control the ambience and the flash, and okay, I got it. Bam, and you pull it off first pop. Because you have to know your foundation. So the sun could not be in a worse position. Look at my shadow. Look at her shadow. My assistant Kevin ran and grabbed this gigantic piece of cardboard from a dumpster because we didn't have a gobo that big. The sun was coming directly in the barrel of my lens, and I could not do anything about it. So we ended up shooting basically with one flash outside, one big softbox left of camera as a main light, and everything else was controlled by my shutter speed. There's the final with the wind machine turned on. So the flash on her face and the highlight in her eyes from the big softbox. Everything else is controlled by the shutter speed. Make sense? Any questions about that before we step away into the next thing? You guys have any questions over there before we move on?
Well, as we like to say, Tony, we always have questions.
It's true.
Absolutely. So, a lot of questions as far as everything that you've been talking about. I'm going to throw this one out from Lakota Wolf.
Sure.
When it comes to the quality of natural light, is it best to photograph in color or black and white to get the best contrast?
Oh. I stayed away from black and white for a long time. And in the last 5-6 years, I became a serious black and white guy again. When Nik Software released Silver FX Pro, all of a sudden I am digging black and white, and I am making some great black and white quality work. So I think the answer has to be Lakota, is that the name? Dakota? Lakota? I think the answer has to be, it depends on the subject and the tonality of your subject. In other words, there are some subjects that in color lend themselves to be great in color. And then there are some subjects that in color lend themselves to be great black and white. If you've got a lot of primary colors, think about how colors change in black and white and how tonalities go into grays. And if you've got extreme vibrant colors, as long as they're different colors, sometimes those will make great different tonalities, but often the colors become the same tonality in gray and in black and white, and it's not so great. So you have to kind of know what colors do best in black and white and what type of color filtration you might choose to put over a black and white file. In other words, in film we would always use a yellow or an orange or a red filter outside because of the clouds. We would pop that, and what that was doing was taking the skies that was blue and making it darker, popping the clouds out. And so it kind of depends on also what the job is that you're shooting is for. Is it something for yourself or is it for a client? But it often, to me, it's dictated by the tonality and the color that's in the picture. That's the telltale for me is what are the colors in the picture?
That's great.
Let me just add one last thing to that. For example, most average green photographs exactly as 18% gray. Most red photographs exactly as 18% gray. So if I'm photographing Julie today and we're in the park and Julie's wearing that red sweater, I'm not going to make a black and white out of it because the ground is going to be the exact same tonality as her sweater. And I know that, and I've got to know that going in before I even start this. Make sense?
That's crazy. That just kind of blew my mind a little bit. So I'm not even sure what I'm going to ask you. No, that was amazing. Great tip. Now I'm like looking back on my pictures and I'm like,
that's why
that makes sense. Mike Gonzalez says, so does the time of day matter for quality of light? And Mike is asking from Brandon, Florida. Yeah, it does. I mean, and especially if you are shooting in color, the warmth it is hard to duplicate and replicate that warm time of day late in the afternoon.
And the direction of light and the angle of the light. You know, if indeed Da Vinci had something to say about that being the 45 degrees, well, I know that once light gets lower in the sky, the quality of the picture does increase. The warmth increases, the softness increases, everything gets better, but there's a danger. And that is there are 4 things that will cause you trouble with working late in the day. And that is, first off, is you're on your location, you're about to photograph Britt on location with his family, and you forgot something in the car and you ran back to the car to get a set of AA batteries, and when you come back, you've lost a stop of light, right? Because once that sun hits 20 degrees, it drops before you know it. So that's a problem. Second problem is generally you want that warmth behind them late in the day. That means they're being lit by this big open sky, which is usually blue. You got to compensate for that blue, either with warming filter, warm it up somehow, change your color temperature in your camera from daylight to flash, or flash to partly cloudy, or to shade. Somehow I got to get warmth in this picture because it's being lit a little cool. Third is they almost always have a 4-year-old. And they've been sugaring that kid up all day, trying to get him in a good mood. And you're out there wide open at a 60th or a 30th trying to freeze his little hands, right? And then the fourth and the most important of all is how many of those shoots can you do in a day? You get 1. And if they cancel on you, photography 1, Tony 0. If you're keeping score and it's not good. So if I can control that sunlight and make it appear like I shot it late in the day, then I win. And I'll show you something coming up how to make that happen.
That's awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and keep going.
Great. Again, Flash Outdoors. This is at Disney. I used to shoot a lot of work for Disney. And I always show this picture. It's one of my favorite jobs down there. This was for a brochure that Disney produced on their wedding photography down there. That property in Orlando does around 3,000 weddings a year. And they're great jobs. They do really beautiful, beautiful work down there. It's not cheap, cheesy photography. It is highest quality there is. It's incredible what they're doing. And so what's fun for me is I was shooting at sunrise. Being in the park, first off, at sunrise by yourself is pretty cool, you know. So I'm shooting away, and then I'm sitting there, oh man, it's too bad that the castle's blue, because the sun was coming up behind me, and the sky is getting more and more and more blue. And I'm seeing this blue starting to get brighter and brighter, and I thought, man, there's going to be a point here where the blue of the castle is going to match the blue of the sky, and it's just going to be flat and ugly and lack what I call color contrast. And there's a guy 10 feet away leaning on a rake. Just a worker guy. And I said, boy, I wish that castle wasn't blue. And this guy went, what color would you like? I said, really? So right behind the fence was a row of flowers. And I said, well, just match those flowers. They're kind of pink, magenta looking flowers. I said, just match that. And I got that. And it's just because I asked. You know, if I'd not asked, I would never have gotten that. And that's what I'm saying about photographers. You guys are kind of a special breed. People will go out of their way to help you get your work. You just have to ask sometimes, you know, and don't take no for an answer. You know, you just have to keep at it, especially if you know it's going to make the picture better. You got to stay after it. You know, I know this is okay, but I think we could do this and do it better. Well, it's a little bit more trouble. I know, but it's going to make the picture better. If it's going to make the picture better, take the effort. That's all. Don't take the easy way out just because, I'll shoot that and I'll fix it later. Don't fix it later. Fix it now. Everybody that knows me knows that that's my number one soapbox. That's my number one soapbox. My number one soapbox, well, there's 2. One is exposures. I don't miss exposures. I might not be the highest impact shooter in the world, but I don't miss my exposures. And the second thing is, you know, you can't shortcut quality. And anything that I can fix before I pull that trigger, I do. I would rather not spend all night in Photoshop fixing what I spent all day shooting. So I don't spend much time at all in post-production, almost none.
If I could just say, Tony, you're talking about quotes. One of my favorite quotes I always go by is, shoot for perfection, not for correction.
I call it pre-touching. Some people call it retouching. I call it pre-touching. If that hair is in your eye and I'm looking and thinking, I can fix that later. No, I can't. I'm just going to reach in here and I'm just going to fix it right now. Because why I don't want to lose 20 minutes later fixing it. I don't have 20 minutes. People are missing dinner with their kids every night. We got to fix that part. We got to stop doing that. Okay. So now we're talking about flash, ambient together. This is my garage. So I'm in the garage with my softbox shooting with my background out in the driveway. So the ambient light that you're seeing that's kind of haloing all around her is controlled by my shutter speed. And that main flash, just like Miss San Diego, is the shot that's lighting her face. And that's where the aperture's set. Make sense? I love garage door lighting. And I'm going to show you some more in just a second. But again, here we go. Now it's outdoors again. There's my flash. My main light flash pops off. And then I've got a strip light that's giving me that outline of her hips and her waist and her arm. Get the idea? If that goes away, if that light is not there, the shot is dead to me. I've got to get the highest quality out of every picture that I can. You know, it's a real simple job. Here's how the shot was lit. You can see the softbox in front of the bike, and then this is my strip light back here in the background. Now, I noticed my first test that small strip light, and it's got a warming gel taped inside the softbox, a warm amber gel taped right over the flash tube. And we'll do that outside as well. But what I noticed was in that position, that light was hitting too hard on my ground behind my model and behind the motorcycle. So I raised that light up and I aimed it straight up. Look at the angle of that softbox now. You know, somebody would walk by that doesn't know much about photography and go, huh, I don't want to hire that guy. He's not even aiming that light at that model. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I was using the bottom edge of that softbox to gobo the light off of the ground. And I was getting plenty of light on her. Okay? That was my goal. And that's what I ended up with. And then again, you can see how bright it is outside. It's the middle of the afternoon, and this is what my shutter speed control gives me. By just bumping my shutter speed up, I'm calming down the ambience. And then the primary subject is being controlled by the flash, and that's all measured by my meter. I live and die by my light meter. You know, I'm one of the few that I know when the transition happened, I heard big name photographers going, finally I can stop using my light meter, because the digital, they can look at the back of the camera. Man, my statement is you've never needed a meter more in your life than you do right now. If you don't have a light meter, you can't get the accuracy that you think you can get. You just can't. And you're fixing stuff all the time.